Hi Booktube, and welcome to a weekly reading wrap-up for 3 novels. Lacking Character by Curtis White, Agnes by Peter Stamm, and Little Gods by Meng Yin. I'm going to start with the Curtis White. So Curtis White is a sort of late postmodernist author in the 90s who had announced his retirement from writing. And so I was rather surprised in 2018 he wrote this, which I only found out about this year. So as ever, late to the party. But I'm delighted because I'm a big Curtis White fan. So yes, Lacking Character. This is balmy. I enjoyed it. It's very funny, but it's nonsense really. I'm not sure if it has anything to say at all. I think you just have to immerse yourself and enjoy the sort of witty writing that's within it. The plot, such as it is that there is a sort of fairy queen in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland who creates golem-like creatures. She's particularly impressed with one of her creations called Percy, who is almost human. So she decides to send him to America, to Minnesota, to get into agricultural college where he'll learn certain skills that she feels will be useful for him to bring back home. And she has a contact in Minnesota who seems to be some sort of feudal lord in the modern world called the Marquis. So when Percy turns up on his front door, the Marquis, who is very lazy, basically sort of dismisses him. And Percy has to survive on his very limited wits because he's, not human. Has various sort of adventures that are self-abasing. And the fairy queen travels over to look for her lost child. And that's basically it. That is the plot. But as I say, it comes down to whether you enjoy the writing or not. So I'm just going to give a couple of brief examples to see whether you sort of would dig the humour or not. So the Queen has found Percy and they get into an argument and she slaps him, and because he's basically like a clay golem, her slap has deformed his face and affected his speech. At last she said, "Now, Percy, what was that all about? I'm sorry, I panked." He didn't speak well, what with the flapping jaw. "And you were so convincingly stoic just minutes before. Even though I didn't like what you were saying, I was impressed. I think the saying is, I lost my nerve. You sound like the mayor of Chicago." So, that's what I find this stuff funny. It reminded me very much of Jarrett Cobett's book, Only Americans Burn in Hell. I will say that Cobett's book, and I'll post the link to my review of that, does contain slightly more of a story plotline and is more politically focused in its targets. This is sort of more sort of gags for gag's sake, I feel. Okay, so here's another one with the Marquis and his sort of toady who's called Rory. And the Marquis has asked Rory for examples of modern miracles or omens. Quite so. Then in Lexington there was a great commotion because a child in the womb shouted, "Hurrah!" "My God, a fetus, you say? What was he hurrahing?" "I cannot say, sir. A fetus shouting anything was sufficient, I believe, to catch their simple attention." "True enough, but I wonder how they heard it. I mean, just how loud could a little fetus, a mere tangle of unresolved coddling, be?" "That's what I said, sir. But there were many that claimed to hear it quite clearly. They said that the youngster was celebrating General Beauregard's victory at the First Manassas. Little late for that, isn't it? The South, it is said, will rise again." "So I've heard." Well, is there more? So again, not really a sort of focused set of targets, but I enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. Agnes by Peter Stamm, which I saw reviewed on Celia's channel, and has the happy coincidence of being written in German, therefore qualifying for the Read More German Lit in 2020. This is my 5th. This translation is by... Oh God, the print on the cover is so tiny I can't read the name. The print is So the translation is by Michael Hoffman. Okay, so this is about a Swiss non-fiction writer who is in Chicago researching for his latest book on luxury trains, like the Pullman and things like that. And he's not a very nice guy. He's a bit sort of egotistical. But he spots this woman who he sort of, I guess, falls in love with at first sight. And they do get together, and they're very, very different. She's sort of quite fragile, and there is a sense perhaps that he's sort of exploiting her, really. But the tables are slightly turned when she asks him to write their story together. So he starts with, all the things that have happened to them together, but then he reaches the point at which he's sort of caught up to where they're at in the relationship. And she sort of says, okay, well, you can still write the future, make it a happy one. That will be the sort of definition of our love, which he does in parts, but he also does things like, he writes things like, put on this dress and we're going to go out and eat this meal, so that what he writes also becomes commands, his way of controlling her. And the second half of the book sort of morphs between those two poles, really, as we see the unseemly side of his character. And that's pretty much it, really. It's a great idea, but it's a bit unsatisfactory. At times, that notion of writing to control and manipulate recedes completely, and we just get straight reportage of their relationship, which isn't written about. Although obviously Peter Stamm is writing about it in this. So there, it's what I call the Terminator moment. So in Terminator 2, the Terminator killing machine is such an incredible feat of technology that it cannot be defeated. It cannot be put up. There's just no way of stopping it getting to its target. And yet there are great chunks of that film where the Terminator is not on the screen, and I always ask, what's it doing? Is it filing its nails? Is it collecting stamps and pasting them into an album? Because the Terminator can repair itself instantaneously. So even if it's been shot up by Arnie, what's it doing? And there are elements of that in this book. Let's get back to the interesting overall theme of writing each other's fates, or writing it in such a way as to control someone's fate. So the heart of this book is very interesting and it's very good, but it's not a long read, but it's just something slightly unfulfilled about its potential, I felt. But I also gave it 4 stars. And on finally to Little Gods. This is a debut novel by Meng Yin, who is Chinese by birth but is an American, and this is written in English, so it's not a translation. And I felt this was really, really good book. It's a set of characters, each who get their own chapters, and it's a wife and her husband have gone to Beijing to have their baby, and at the point of birth the husband has stepped out, and this is the time of the Tiananmen Square massacre. He has stepped out into the streets because he is full of sort of political idealism, and they're separated. We don't know what's happened to him, so the mother has to go back to Shanghai where they live with the baby on her own. And she becomes quite reliant on the elderly next door neighbour for looking after her child so that she can continue her career as a single parent. She is a lecturer at a university in theoretical physics. So the book ostensibly is the search of that daughter who was born on that day on a quest to find her long lost father, who she never knew. But actually the book is really about the mother, who is the only character who does not get a chapter to herself, because we get lots of other people filling in, because she's almost an ideal figure of woman to certain of the men, her ideas on time and stuff, but she is a character who's erased herself, she's erased her history, she has rebuilt herself, because her whole goal is to leave China and to go to the US, which she achieves and takes her daughter with her. So her daughter has grown up only in America, really. And it's a book about, as I say, it's a book about erasure. And it reminded me in that sense of Lucia by Alex Phoebe, about the erasure of woman by society, but also in this case by self. And I just found it very effective and very affecting too. It also reminded me of Valeria Luiselli's The Lost Children Archive, in that so many sentences have a sort of emotional kick to them. Not one that's going to lay you out and stop you up reading, but just a little like punch in the ribs, like sharp intake of breath. And there's lots and lots of that, and fantastic writing. So to give you an example of the writing, this is right at the beginning. This is a description of Tiananmen Square, which is just being occupied. The soldiers haven't moved in yet. Bodies have come. In the square, bodies sit, stand, and lie on the hot paved stone. The square was built for 600,000 bodies. For weeks there have been more. Rats sniff between folds of newspaper, flies regurgitate on sunburned shins, roaches scuttle across sleeping toes. Women in white uniforms weave through, carrying metal tanks, spraying disinfectant where concrete shows. From above, this movement looks like the primitive organism, breathing. In the nucleus, a burst of colour radiates and contracts as bodies leave the square, return and leave again. West of the outer ring, a dark mass gathers, troops preparing to enter. In every city and circumstance, there are those who will go on with living. In the east quadrant, an old man circles his Swanton courtyard for a morning stroll. By the northern lake, a young couple waits to the Tian Mi Mi on the radio. South of the train station, 3 boys race to catch a hen escaping her coop. Between the second and third ring roads, a woman crosses a canal bridge on her walk to work. The woman has a round and candid face, and her hair, striped with white, has been brushed neatly off her forehead. She carries a sensible black purse over her shoulder that has served her for the good part of a decade. She is not chubby, but her bones are sturdy, and she commands more space than a woman should. So I just think that was brilliant writing. First of all, the description of these bodies packed in the square and all the sort of animal life that is attracted to them, the rats and the insects and stuff. It's sort of quite chilling. And also, of course, once they're killed in the square, then the animal life is sort of feeding off their, it's a sort of presentiment of that state. And then we get the next paragraph where these people are completely uninvolved, unconcerned by events going on in the square. So the revolutionaries in the square and the people going about their normal lives who are just not involved or concerned by it at all. And the book's called Little Gods because very early on the revolutionaries are described as little gods, in that it was seen very much as revolutionaries are seen very much as in any country, not just here, are seen as sort of the energy of youth who are sort of being held back by the older generations. And that sets the theme of wanting to constantly reinvent yourself. Once revolution is sort of, squashed, you can't have a sort of revolutionary sweep away the older generations and history. Therefore, you have to come up with another way of reinventing yourself, which is what the mother figure has so successfully done in this book. And she's a theoretical physicist. She is interested in time and in entropy. Entropy is what Einstein described as it's a measure of sort of decay, natural decay within any system. And Einstein said that entropy proves that time is only one directional. You can only go forward in time. You can't go back, i.e. you can't time travel. But the mother, the theoretical physicist, is constantly trying to defy that on a human scale. Her theoretical physics is interested on a natural law scale that applies to matter and the whole universe, but she's also applied it to her life, because how to remember the future and forget the past. Well, obviously you can't remember a future that hasn't happened, but you can shape it by how you change yourself. And it's a really well done book. It's about, the reason she wants to strip away everything from the past is because she was brought up in absolute rural penury, and that is what she wants to get away from and to reinvent herself. And I just thought it was really, really well done. As I say, the writing is superb. Lots of little, punches into the gut. It lags a bit towards the end until the final sort of chapter and a half, where it sort of picks up the momentum again. So it's not a perfect book, but it is very, very good. And I give this 4.5 stars out of 5. Okay, so there you have it. That's this week's weekly wrap up. Please do stay safe. Please observe the recommended guidelines. Remember that it is now become a lottery, the air that you breathe outside, because you don't know who else has sort of breathed that air. So please do follow government advice. Okay, till next time. Thanks very much.